It was the rain that made me take the long way home. I wanted to listen to the soft percussion on the windshield, the kind of gentle storm that made the world feel like it had paused just for a breath. I had picked up Ty from that little place. He liked downtown. Extra ginger chicken, no onions. A bottle of red wine rested beside me on the passenger seat, already uncorked by the kind man at the shop. It was supposed to be an ordinary Thursday. I was supposed to come home, light a candle, change into something soft, and tell him that maybe we still had time. Instead, I opened the door to silence. No music playing, no news blaring from the TV, no keys tossed carelessly into the bowl by the door, only stillness. A strange chill moved through the house, not from the weather but from something else. Something wrong. I set the wine and food down on the kitchen island and noticed it. His phone, unlocked, buzzing quietly. Next to it, his wedding ring. My heart stuttered. He never took it off, not even to sleep. I remember once in Cabo, he got a rash under the band and still refused to remove it. "It keeps me grounded," he had said with a wink, squeezing my hand. I picked it up now, cool metal against my skin, and felt nothing but the echo of a lie. A whiff of his cologne reached me as I walked toward the bedroom. That smoky amber one I used to love. But it was too strong, as if someone had recently sprayed it to cover something else. The bed was made, but not the way I do it. His way, sloppy. Pillows mismatched. The scent of unfamiliar shampoo lingering in the air. I moved into the bathroom, 2 towels hanging, both damp. Lipstick smudged on the edge of the glass beside the sink. Not my shade, too cherry red. A hairbrush with a long blonde strand wound around the bristles. My heart was pounding, not fast but deeply, like it wanted, to dig a hole through my chest and hide. Then I saw it. The scarf. The silk one I'd given Alyssa, his assistant, last Christmas. Emerald green with gold leaf patterns. I remember how she'd gasped, saying no one had ever bought her something so lovely. I thought I saw tears in her eyes. Now it was draped over the back of my vanity chair like it lived here. Something broke in my hand. I looked down to see the perfume bottle shattered at my feet, golden liquid soaking into the ivory rug. My fingers trembled, bleeding slightly where the glass had cut. But I didn't feel it. The scent hit me hard. Jasmine, sandalwood, something sweet and synthetic. His favorite. A birthday gift from years ago. Now it mixed with the blood, the cologne, and betrayal in the air. I sank to the floor, knees folding beneath me. Everything inside felt still, like my soul had taken one long step back and slammed the door. I didn't hear the front door open. "Jesus, you're home early," his voice rang out, casual, annoyed. Then he saw me. The rug, the perfume, the silence. He didn't panic, didn't even flinch. "Look," he started, shrugging off his coat. "I was gonna talk to you, but I'm done carrying dead weight, okay? You used to be someone. Now you're just tired and bitter." He stepped over the broken glass like it was clutter. My lips parted, but no sound came. What was there to say when the person you built your life around tells you it was all just scaffolding for his dreams? 12 years. Countless nights spent editing his presentations, nursing his ego, biting my tongue at client dinners. And now I was dead weight. He didn't wait for a response, just turned and walked out. His keys jingled as he slammed the wall, door. Gone. And just like that, I was alone. Left with the mess. The mortgage, the debts he'd piled in our names, the silence of a house that no longer wanted me in it. I sat on the floor until the rain outside stopped, until the golden stain dried on the rug, until the blood stopped seeping from my hand. Only then did I reach for the wedding photo on the nightstand. I stared at our faces, our rehearsed smiles, our future frozen in time. My thumb brushed over the glass. Cracked. Like us. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, watching shadows shift across the ceiling, hearing the echo of his words. You used to be someone. But here's the thing, I still was. He just couldn't see her anymore, and that, I decided, was going to be his greatest mistake. When I met Jason, I was 26 and unapologetically ambitious. I had just been promoted to senior brand strategist at one of the top agencies in the city. I wore tailored pantsuits and red lipstick, pitched campaigns with fire in my chest, and ended my days with wine and watercolor, my fingers stained with both ink and passion. He walked into a networking event with that lazy confidence some men wear like cologne. Not too eager, not too polished. Just enough chaos in his hair to make it charming. He wasn't the wealthiest man in the room, or the best dressed. But when he looked at me across the crowd, it was as if I were the only one he'd come to see. You don't belong in a room like this, he told me that night. I laughed, caught off guard. Why? Because you're not pretending to be someone. Everyone else is. Flattery wrapped in insight. That was Jason's superpower, making you feel like you were already extraordinary. You just needed him to unlock it. He spoke about his startup like it was a religion, a wellness brand that would redefine the feminine experience. He called me his missing piece. He asked questions no one else did. What did my art mean? What did I dream about when I was 10? When he proposed, I said yes through tears, not fear. I thought I was saying yes to partnership, to a shared empire. I didn't realize I was stepping onto a slowly shrinking island. I left my job 6 months after we got married. We agreed I'd help build his company full-time, just until it got off the ground. We couldn't afford to. Pay me yet, he said, but I'd own half. That was the plan. And in the beginning, it felt beautiful. We brainstormed product lines on our bedroom floor, laughed over coffee at 2 a.m. while designing mood boards, and cheered when our first email list crossed 500 subscribers. I ran the social media, pitched to influencers, even wrote the copy for our first campaign. He called me his secret weapon. But the word secret began to echo louder over time. At meetings, he introduced me as helping out behind the scenes. When I spoke too passionately, he'd place a hand gently on my thigh under the table, a silent shh. Later, he said it was just to keep the energy balanced. When I wore my favorite structured blazer to a pitch meeting, he leaned over and whispered, "Babe, maybe go softer next time. You come off intimidating." I laughed it off. I started swapping heels for flats, reds for nudes, fire for water. Friends noticed. Jane, my best friend from college, once asked me if I was happy, or just convenient. I brushed her off. My mother raised a brow when I mentioned that Jason didn't think I should start my art page again. "Love shouldn't feel like erasure, darling," she said. I remember stirring my tea extra slowly, pretending not to hear. There was always a reason, always a justification. He was tired, he was stressed, he needed peace at home, he needed me to hold things together, and so I did. I cleaned up his canceled meetings, soothed irate clients, coached his interns while he took long lunches with investors. I laughed at his jokes at dinner parties while he bragged about how he built everything from the ground up. No one knew I was still unpaid, still unseen. One afternoon, I stood in front of the mirror after a shower and didn't recognize myself. My hair was duller. My face was softer. My eyes looked hushed. I hadn't painted in months. I couldn't remember the last time I'd bought something I liked for the house. Our living room was now full of cold grays, glass surfaces, and chrome edges. Jason's taste, not mine. It hit me when I looked at my closet. There were pieces in there, bright prints, bohemian dresses, oversized earrings, that hadn't been touched in years. I used to wear them with confidence. Now they felt loud, unwelcome, foreign. I tried to talk to him. We were in the kitchen. I was chopping garlic. I said I missed working, that I wanted to start freelancing again, maybe teach a branding workshop online. Just something mine. He didn't look up from his phone. "You're being emotional," he said flatly. "Every time things start going well, you want to change the plan. We're on the verge of something huge, and you're talking about blogs?" "I'm not trying to sabotage anything," I began. "Then act like it," he cut in, dropping his phone on the counter. God, I just need someone who fits the brand. That word again. Brand. As if I were a product. A piece of packaging he could redesign or discard. I stared at him. And for a moment, the years collapsed. I saw myself in my office at 26, barefoot and glowing under the skylight, planning ad campaigns and believing in me. Where had she gone? I started to shrink after that, quietly, without protest. I stopped talking about work, stopped reaching out to friends. I deleted my art page drafts. I let his new assistant take over branding. She was younger, blonde, sleek in a way that made me feel dusty. Our home became a curated showroom for his version of success. Not a trace of me left. Not in the decor, not in the playlists, not in the conversations. I used to be his muse. Now I was a shadow. And the worst part? I let it happen. Grief doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just sits quietly in the corners of your life. In unopened mail, in cold coffee, in the smell of something burning before you remember you forgot to eat. After Jason walked out, I kept thinking he'd come back, that there'd be an apology, a conversation, a sigh of regret. But he didn't. He vanished with our money, our history, our supposed future, and left me with the paperwork. The bank called first, then the credit card companies, then the accountant. "Did you know he hadn't filed your joint taxes for the past 2 years?" she asked gently, as if bracing for a crash. "No," I whispered, my voice barely alive. "No, I didn't." He had taken loans out in both our names, lines of credit built on my clean financial history, on the reputation I'd worked a decade to build. I hadn't signed anything knowingly, but I had trusted him. I had looked the other way when he asked me to just initial here or sign quickly. It's a formality. Now I was left to drown in his debts. Our mortgage had defaulted. The car was in his name and he sold it. My name was on the lease. My name was on the liability. But his name had already vanished from every document, every email, every call. The worst part? No one stayed. It wasn't just that I had been betrayed. I had been orphaned from my own life. Jason had spent years subtly cutting cords, discouraging friendships, criticizing my family's negative energy, moving us to neighborhoods where I knew no one. I thought it was love. I thought it was nesting. But it was isolation. Constructed like a cage, padded with comfort until I didn't notice the bars. Now the cage was empty, and I was sitting alone in it. I stopped answering texts, stopped brushing my hair. Some days I sat in the same clothes from the night before, watching dust dance in the afternoon light, waiting for something. I didn't know what. A knock? A miracle? A rewind button? My inbox overflowed with rejection. Emails. I applied to freelance gigs with a resume that now felt like it belonged to someone else. Someone shinier. Someone whole. I sold my engagement ring at a pawn shop on 42nd. The clerk didn't even blink as he weighed it on a scale like fruit. I didn't cry until I got home, and then it wasn't for the ring. It was for the girl who once believed in the promise it held. My grandmother's locket, the one with the tiny pressed forget-me-not inside. paid for groceries that week. I stared at it in the pawnshop glass before handing it over. Fingers, cold and reluctant. That one broke something in me. Not loudly, but permanently. The house grew darker. I stopped opening the curtains. The smell of old perfume lingered in the air. The one he liked. I thought about throwing the bottle out, but couldn't. It stood on the dresser like a ghost, watching me. The lowest moment? It wasn't dramatic. It was stupid. I was sitting on the kitchen floor back against the cabinets, eating expired peanut butter from the jar with a plastic spoon. I'd found it at the back of the cupboard, crusted but technically edible. My head throbbed from hunger and stress, and I couldn't afford the meds I needed. So I just sat there, trying not to cry, because crying made it worse. Crying made the pressure behind my eyes unbearable. I whispered to no one, This can't be where I end. And then, the drawer. I don't know why I opened it. Maybe looking for batteries. Maybe to distract myself from the rising panic. But there it was. A thick folder, dusty, half forgotten. Inside, my old notes. Pages from the early years. Scribbled sketches of product lines, brand names, a logo idea I once doodled at midnight while Jason snored beside me. Glow, Grace lives on within. I had loved that name. I remember writing it with a Sharpie, circling it like it was sacred. Inside was a full proposal. A skincare line focused on post-trauma healing. Oils, creams, scents, formulas I researched myself. All natural, ritual-based. A kind of therapy in texture. In the margin of the last page, in the bold handwriting I barely recognized as my own, I'd written, "You have magic in you." I stared at those words like they were a lifeline. Because they were. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from something waking. It wasn't lightning. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't clarity. It was a flicker. A memory of who I was before. I became someone else's reflection. I wiped the peanut butter off my lip. I stood. My knees cracked. My back ached. But I stood. I turned on the light. I opened a window. I made tea, and I began to read every word of that proposal again, not as a dream deferred, but as a blueprint for survival. Leaving the city didn't feel brave. It felt like surrender. I packed what little I had left into a beat-up hatchback. A friend lent me some clothes, my journals, the old skincare proposal, and a chipped mug I wasn't ready to part with. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. There wasn't anyone left to say it to. The cottage belonged to my college roommate's aunt, who had passed years ago. It sat on a secluded curve of a lake, 2 hours from anywhere, surrounded by pines that rustled even without wind. It had no Wi-Fi, barely any cell signal, and a stubborn front door that groaned like an old man when I pushed it open. The first thing I did was sleep. I slept for 2 days straight, not gracefully, not tucked into crisp sheets, but curled on, a lumpy mattress with unwashed hair and breath that tasted like old grief. I woke only to drink water and then sleep again. My body, starved of rest and safety for so long, claimed both with greedy hands. The silence felt strange at first. It was loud in its own way. Every creak, every bird call, every shifting shadow had weight. I'd forgotten how to be alone without noise. But on the third day, I opened a window. The scent of pine and loam filled the space like incense. I made tea. I walked barefoot to the dock. The lake shimmered under the late morning sun, fog still curling at the edges. I sat there, sweater sleeves pulled over my knuckles, and watched ducks glide like they owned the world. For the first time in what felt like years, I didn't feel watched. I didn't feel judged. I was just there. And it was enough. I started writing, again. At first, just scattered thoughts. Then longer pages. I wrote about the lies I'd swallowed, about the way my body still flinched at certain songs, about the smell of that perfume bottle still haunting my memory. I wrote until my wrist ached, until the ink bled through the page, until I started dreaming in color again. Cooking became a kind of prayer. Simple meals, real food, tomatoes that smelled like sun, bread that warmed the air. I played old records on the dusty turntable in the living room. Jazz, mostly. Nina Simone and Billie Holiday wrapped around the wooden beams like ghosts I wanted to keep. There were no mirrors in the bedroom, but one hung in the hallway. I passed it every morning, avoiding my reflection at first. But eventually I looked. Not once. Not with judgment. Just long enough to start seeing her again. The woman I used to be. Not the same, no. Softer around the edges, but still standing. One misty morning, I sat on the dock with a cup of coffee, and the lake looked like glass. The trees were reflected perfectly, as if the world had doubled in peace. A breeze kissed my cheek, and something in me settled. I had nothing. But I was free. That was the moment I took the folder out again. The Glow proposal. The old ink had smudged, and some pages were stained with tears. But the bones were strong. I rewrote it. I refined the brand message. I updated the packaging mock-ups, sketched by hand this time. The tagline came easily now. Made for the woman who survived, and still shines. I researched for days, curled under a blanket near the fireplace. I found an indie lab that made ethical botanical products. I emailed them with cautious hope. I reached out to a female-led investor group I'd bookmarked years ago but never dared contact. Funding women 40+ with first-time founder stories. It felt like a sign. I applied with trembling fingers. Submitted the pitch deck I built from scratch. Uploaded my photo, unfiltered. Filled out every field with brutal honesty. No team, no budget, just an idea born in heartbreak. Then I waited. I don't know what I expected. Maybe silence, maybe a kind rejection. But instead, 3 days later, an email lit up the screen of my old laptop like a match in a cave. We'd love to hear more. Can you join us for a Zoom pitch on Friday? I almost didn't. I almost convinced myself I wasn't ready, that I didn't look the part, that my voice would shake too much, that they'd see through me. But I did it. Hair in a loose bun. A sweater I'd knitted myself that winter I tried to heal. No makeup, just moisturizer and honesty. I told them the story. Not all of it, not the names, but the pain. The rediscovery. The reason behind the oils, the rituals, the brand's soul. When I finished, the room on the other end of the Zoom call was quiet. One woman, mid-50s, gray streak in her hair, warm brown eyes, nodded slowly and said, "It's about time the world had something made by someone real." They said yes. They offered seed funding. Small at first, but enough. Enough to start. I closed the laptop. I sat still for 10 whole minutes. Then I cried. The kind of cry that makes your ribs ache, that comes from your knees, not your eyes. Relief, gratitude, and something else. Belonging. That night, I lit a candle. Not for mourning, but for rebirth. Not for the life I lost, but for the one I was building, by hand, by heart, by fire. I didn't set out to build an empire. I just wanted something that was mine. The product began as a whisper. A night oil made with wild, lavender, cold-pressed rosehip, and bergamot. Soothing, rich, clean. I called it Afterlight. It wasn't about wrinkles or radiance. It was about becoming. About rituals that healed. Scents that held space for silence and softness. The branding came easily. It was like writing a letter to the woman I had once been, and the millions like her, the tired, the forgotten, the survivors. My tiny cottage kitchen became my lab. I labeled every bottle by hand, each one with a small quote on the back in cursive script. "You are not broken. You are becoming." I hired 2 women, both single mothers who had been through divorce, debt, and disillusionment. One had worked retail for 15 years and knew packaging better than I ever could. The other used to be a lab assistant and had a mind for measurements and quality control that I didn't possess. We worked late into the night with jazz playing and cinnamon tea brewing. We laughed a lot. Sometimes we cried. But always we moved forward. At first, the orders came slow. A trickle. Friends of friends. Then word of mouth started to bloom. A small wellness influencer with real followers posted a glowing review. She'd called it liquid healing. Then it snowballed. Emails flooded in. Bigger influencers. An online wellness magazine ran a feature titled The Skincare Brand, Born from Rock Bottom. I sat on the floor of the cottage, barefoot, surrounded by packaging tape, and sobbed into my knees when I saw it. Not from sadness, from awe, from arrival. Within months, we were selling out in 72 hours. I brought in a fulfillment partner, then an agency. I fought for my copy to stay raw and real. No retouched models, no airbrushed promises, just truth. Then came the call. A luxury beauty conglomerate, one of the biggest. They wanted to meet. They were interested in acquiring Afterlight, a 7-figure deal. They'd leave me with creative control, keep my team, and give me a seat at the leadership table. I said I'd think about it. And that night, I walked to the lake. I wore my red wool coat, the one I'd bought secondhand the day the funding came through. The air was sharp, the stars crisp and unblinking. The lake was glass again, just like that first morning. I stood at the edge, listening to the hum of winter approaching. I pulled out the wedding photo I'd been carrying for too long. Folded, creased, forgotten at the bottom of an old box. I looked at it for the last time. I didn't feel rage anymore, or grief, just closure. I tore it down the center, let the halves fall into the breeze, and watched them lift like ash into the trees. I didn't need revenge, but I did need truth. So I hired a lawyer, quietly, methodically. I gave her everything I had, old emails, forged documents, records of the loans he'd taken in my name, screenshots of texts between him and his secretary, the one with the scarf. I didn't need to scream. I wasn't trying to ruin him. I just wanted to reclaim my name. She was meticulous, discreet, compassionate. She said the fraud case was strong, especially given the pattern of coercion and financial abuse. It wasn't just betrayal. It was criminal. Still, I hesitated. Not out of pity, but because I didn't want to define myself by what I was against. I was busy building, healing, becoming. But when I learned that Jason had used the same tactics with another woman, his new girlfriend, the one who wore my perfume now, I felt a calm, steady fire move through me. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about breaking the pattern. So I said yes. We filed. Quietly. No press. No drama. Just truth. I didn't attend the deposition. I didn't want to see his face again. But my lawyer said he looked stunned, like he couldn't quite believe the meek, agreeable wife he'd discarded was now the one holding the receipts. There was a settlement. My name was cleared, my credit repaired. And the funds from the case? I used them to start a grant program for female founders over 40. The first grant went to one of my employees, to launch her line of handmade herbal teas. We named it Steeped in Strength. The woman in the mirror had returned, not unchanged, but whole. She wore soft linen and bold lipstick. She laughed easily, loved slowly, and spoke without apology. She burned sage not for ceremony, but for joy. She wore the melted pendant where her wedding ring used to sit, a teardrop-shaped gold charm engraved with the word light. And sometimes, in quiet moments, she danced in the kitchen, barefoot, eyes closed, remembering what it felt like to be free. I didn't need the world to know what he did. I only needed the world to know what I became. The invitation came through a mutual acquaintance, one of those polished people who always existed on the edges of our old life. It was an art gallery opening in the city. Jason's new company was co-sponsoring the event. His name was listed under Featured Entrepreneurs, a soft flex, a comeback headline in the making. It also happened to fall on his birthday. How poetic. I didn't RSVP. I didn't need to. I knew I would go, not to gloat, not to burn bridges or throw wine in faces. I had no taste for drama anymore. But I had something far rarer, proof, and I was finally ready to deliver it. I chose my outfit with the care of a woman who had nothing left to prove, a scarlet silk dress, cut just right. My heels made no sound on the sidewalk. My lipstick was matte, bold, and defiant. My hair swept into a loose, effortless bun. Around my neck hung a gold pendant, teardrop-shaped, forged from the wedding ring he left behind. I called it my silent vow. The gallery was sleek, all white walls and champagne flutes and laughter that sounded just a little too loud. Abstract pieces hung like frozen emotion. Every face was curated. Every smile, rehearsed. I walked in alone. I spotted him near the back, laughing, holding court in his tailored suit, the kind I used to help him pick. A woman stood by his side, blonde, younger, in a dress that said, "Look at me but don't speak." At first he didn't notice me, but someone did. A mutual friend, eyebrows raised in disbelief. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Jason turned, finally, and saw me. He froze. I didn't blink. I didn't smile. I just walked past him. Straight to the event's co-sponsor, a sharp-eyed woman with a notepad and purpose. She looked like someone who had seen too many men get away with too much. "Hi," I said softly. "You'll want to read this before you go any further with him." I handed her a sealed envelope. Inside, forged signatures, debt documentation, legal affidavits, messages between him and his assistant, now his girlfriend, laced with coercion and fraud. Everything my lawyer had gathered, time-stamped and bulletproof. She frowned, opened it, and began reading. I didn't wait for the gasp. I didn't turn to see Jason's face fall. I didn't care to hear his denial, his excuses, his spin. I had already walked away. The cool night air met me like an old friend as I stepped outside. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady, grounded. He tried to contact me after that. At first, it was a text. "What the hell did you do?" Then another. "We need to talk. Please." Then silence. Then flowers. I didn't reply. Not out of bitterness, but because I was finished. You see, closure isn't always a dramatic door slam or a fiery exit. Sometimes it's just a quiet refusal to keep explaining yourself. I never responded. Not when he emailed. Not when he called from different numbers. Not when he left a voicemail at 2 a.m., his voice slurred and soft, saying my name like it still belonged to him. It didn't. I had reclaimed it, along with my future. Months passed. Afterlight bloomed like wildflowers. We launched 2 more products. A limited edition collection sold out in under 6 hours. The team grew. My name started to appear on panels, in articles, in quiet conversations between women who had once been invisible too. I wasn't famous, but I was felt. One morning, I returned to the lake. The cottage was quiet, warm, scented with lavender and cedarwood. My mug steamed in my hands, and I wore the sweater I'd knit that first winter, the one with uneven sleeves. My pendant glinted in the sun. I sat on the dock, barefoot, fresh journal in my lap. The mist curled across the water like a veil, being lifted. I wrote slowly. About new ideas, new products, a foundation for women rebuilding after divorce, a retreat center, a book maybe. Not about him, but about becoming. My thoughts wandered to a memory. Me on the kitchen floor, holding expired peanut butter and a shattered heart. I wanted to reach back and whisper, "You make it. You really do." That day, I let the quiet speak. The lake didn't need applause, and neither did I. Not every ending needs a bang. Some are written in ink, in skin, in silence. Some are whispered on lips you'll never meet, in rooms you'll never step into. In stories passed between women who see themselves in you and finally feel less alone. I was once erased, but now I am written in full.